A short term turns into a long term, and that's a little bit what happened to me about 40 years ago. I was just going to go be a chief and live in the woods for a bit and go back to Sarasota, Florida, where I thought was the only place to live, and God said otherwise. He said, no, it's you're done with Florida. You're gonna stay here in South Carolina. So I've never regretted it. It's been great. But I had to think, even coming back here, I could have very easily grown up in northern Indiana. I was born in Wakarusa. That's where Mom and Dad lived. And but what happened is my mom and Dad got married. Dad was from Middlebury. Mom was from Napanee. And they got married, and they got called into 1W service back in the early 60s. And so I don't know if they chose it, but they got put into Sarasota Memorial Hospital in Sarasota, Florida. So they went down south and got to be down there for 2 years. And my two older brothers were born. And they moved back after their service was done, living in Wakarusa. And I was born. And when I was 3 years old, Dad is like, man, it is cold up here. I know I grew up in this, but Florida sure was nice for those 2 years. Let's just get out of here. And so he talked his mom and dad into it and moving as well. They've kind of together, and they moved down in 68, moved down to Sarasota. And so that's all I knew. I didn't know. I wouldn't remember northern Indiana except coming back every summer to come visit grandparents and relatives. So I had to, that story, I think about it, and then my projection with coming to South Carolina. At this point now, I've got all of my family living there. Mom and Dad actually moved up from Florida about 3 years ago. We got them out of Florida and up to South Carolina. And just how things can change over a few decisions. And that's kind of what happened with Abraham way back in the Old Testament, where God asked him to pack up his people and go to a land that I'll show you. Now, he had it took a lot more faith even for him, I believe, because of so many people following him and having to know. I'm sure he got questioned many times, do you have any idea where we're supposed to go? And he's just like, no, God will show us. And you talk about just simply having to be anchored in who you know you're connected to and who's leading. And so, but I think about young people today even, you just don't know what in the next 40 years exactly where the course is going to go for you. For some of us that are older, we're kind of on the other side of that, where we know that things can still change. We don't know what the next year holds, but a young person does have a lot of future, Lord willing, that can happen, that God can just unfold for you in many different ways. I had to think just for some scripture. I will, okay, we got the first slide up. I'm going to hit a little bit of scripture, and then we'll go right into just showing camp. I just want to expose you to what's going on at camp, and then we'll have a little time for some questions afterwards. But turn to Philippians 4, if you would. Philippians 4, I just love what Paul was saying here. There's just so many beautiful, encouraging things that we can get from God's word in the day that we live in. It doesn't matter where you're at. It just doesn't matter where you're at in life this morning, what you're going through, what you're facing, what you've been through. There's just beautiful things in God's word, promises and encouragement, and it'll meet you right where you're at. In Philippians 4, it starts with therefore, and so usually when I see that, I go back a little bit, because years back there weren't chapters, so it was probably talking about something prior to that. So go back to actually chapter 3, verse 20 and 21. It says, for our conversation is in heaven, from whence also we look for the Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall change our vile body, that it may be fashioned like unto his glorious body, according to the working whereby he is able even to subdue all things unto himself. Then he says, therefore, my beloved, my brethren, dearly beloved and longed for, my joy and crown. And this next little phrase is what really stands out. So stand fast in the Lord, my dearly beloved. And as I hit that, and then I did a little looking at other some of the other apostles in some of their writings, they also had that little that little phrase is different places in the New Testament, something about standing fast in the Lord. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Stand fast in the Lord. Does that mean we just kind of hunker down and preserve ourselves and just kind of hang on until we just kind of get through? And I don't believe it does. I mean, standing fast, there's got to be more than that, because his call to us is what you guys do, helping the needy, helping the ones that need help, and reaching out and getting your hands dirty. I mean, the church really should be a place where it's okay to mess with dirt. I mean, there's going to be filth coming in that we want to help let the power of God work through to clean up. So what does it mean to stand fast? Well, in verse 2 and 3, Paul just talked to about some specific people, but then jumping down to verse 4, I think in verse 4 to 9, he's actually telling us what this standing fast means. It says, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. Now, is there any other better way to stand fast? I mean, it's just kind of right there. Paul just kind of went down and showed us some practical ways. And again, we all know that our faith, our Christian walk isn't a works-based experience. Yes, there's going to be works. There's going to be action. He's telling us some ways to go about it. But it's a faith in Christ that we know we can stand fast in him. It just doesn't matter what comes our way. We have someone that we can go to 24/7, all the time, and he's wanting that. That's the relationship he wants to have. And I've just been so blessed too, just in the last many years, just thinking about, Jesus isn't right here walking in among us. In fact, he said, when he left, he said, I'm going to leave, because he said, it's needful for me to leave. He said, it's important for me to leave. And the disciples could have said, no, we can't let you go. But he said, no, I have to go so that my Father can send his Spirit, because through that, he's going to lead you into all truth, and you're going to be able to do things even beyond what I've done. And I've often wondered, well, how can you outdo Jesus? Well, it's not doing things that he hasn't done before, but think about the Holy Spirit moving across the globe. There are believers empowered to move in the work of Christ, and Jesus isn't in bodily flesh right beside him. He was in one spot. But his Spirit can be globally everywhere. And that's what's beautiful. Come up here in Indiana. We can worship with believers that are living for Jesus and want to follow what the Spirit is showing them. I can go to South Carolina, go to Florida, go across the big water. And believers, it's the same God. And he has sent his Spirit to be able to lead us into all truth. And we have his word. We are blessed people. We really are. We have no excuse as to not knowing. If we live life as if I just don't know, then we're just not putting our faith and trust in the one who made it possible. He paid the price. The victory's been won. It is me claiming that. And it's not just, it's every day. Paul said, I die daily. I know that it's a giving up, because there's just enough of our flesh that wants to push through and try to dominate in areas, and we just have to say, God, it's about you. Guide me today. But that's what's beautiful about his Spirit doing that. He wants to help us know and orchestrate our life every day. And I like to tell people, it's not the lightning bolts that get you through life, like these big wow moments. It's the little mundane. God wants to show himself in everyday little conversations. It might be just you passing a smile to somebody as you're going through the grocery store, some little word of encouragement. Those are the things that God, I know, honors him and blesses him. It's an offering to him because you're just living it out. You don't come here Sundays to try to get filled up for the week. You're getting filled up during the week to just come celebrate on Sundays what God's doing in all of our lives, and we just get to do it collectively together as a body. So that's what I believe that the God's Spirit wants to do in us is some of our I would say some of our most impactful times with God should be happening during the week. Might be while you're driving in the car, while you're spending time with him sometime all day, but maybe there's a specific time in your closet. But it's beautiful when we experience the awesomeness of God on our daily experience, and then church is just a time to celebrate together. And what a way to encourage each other to stand fast. Again, come back to stand fast. Don't give up, because in a group, any group this size, there's going to be people that hit hard. There's hard things come, and we just have to be able to encourage each other. I will, as far as we'll go into to show the presentation. As far as what I am doing at camp right now. Is actually, I'm a family worker, so I work with families of boys that come in, that the families want the boy to come to camp. I've been doing this now for about 15 years. I would have actually, like I said, come to camp back in 1985, so this next year will be 40 years that I actually came to camp to be a chief and stayed involved and done lots of the different roles. But right now I'm doing working with families. And we have 3 of us family workers that do that. So when a phone call comes in from anywhere in South Carolina or some parts of Georgia, some in North Carolina, then it will go to one of us 3, and then we will actually call them and start figuring out, is it a good fit? Is camp really, is it really something that's going to meet their needs? Is it something that they're are going to be able to follow through as well? Because a boy, one thing we are not is just a place to put boys and then for the family to bow out and act like there's no responsibility. That is not who we are. We are a ministry that wants to help the whole family unit. So when that family wants, if a parent calls, and most of our calls come from parents that have heard about us, looked us up online or whatever, they're desperate. If we get a call from a parent, I want to know pretty early into it, I want to start feeling, is this parent committed enough to recognize that they want to make some changes too? And I let them know that if your boy comes to camp, he's going to be at camp about 18 months. We don't have a set time, but that's about what it is. And I said in those 18 months, he's going to talk about home a lot. Your home is going to be you're going to feel like you're in a glass walls for your home, because we're going to hear everything. We're going to know a lot. Are you okay with that? Are you willing? And I want parents to be able to recognize that they're fine with that kind of exposure, because the truth has to come out. Now, some of the parents have absolutely done the best they can. We have probably at any given time, out of our 40 boys, we have 40 boys there all the time. There's 4 groups of 10. But out of our 40 boys, we probably have well over half of them have been adopted. And so there are thousands of adoptions that go well. Don't hear anything about it. There's the acclamation goes well. But the boys that come to camp often have struggled with this adoption, whether they've been adopted when they were little, 6, 7, 8 years old, or some of them were at birth. But there's all of a sudden there's a lot of issues that are happening with the boy and the families wanting help. So in that process, we have some really good families that have tried the best they know how. In faith, they stepped through that door, adopted a child, and now they're kind of at a place where they just don't know what to do. There's a lot of attachment issues. There's a lot of reaction going on. There's a lot of just pushback and lack of being able to take in love. I mean, and the family's just like, we don't know what to do. The kind of boys we serve, let me just describe that a little bit to help you know. We take boys from 8 to 15. We're licensed up to 17, but we will rarely take a boy beyond 15, just because we have a lot of referrals for more boys, 12, 13, and we probably do our best work with boys from about 11 to 13 is what we do our best work. But we can go as young as 8, and then they might be close to 16 when they leave, some of the boys that are older. But the kind of boys we serve are the kind of boys that truly have a lot of emotional dysregulation. They simply, if you pay them to behave themselves for a week, they might do it the first week, but I doubt it. They probably can't. They probably wouldn't. They just can't behave. They've just never learned how to behave themselves. And believe me, if bribery would work, any coercion, I mean, it's all been tried on these boys. And when you take a child that just has a lot of emotional dysregulation, they just cannot. They're very impulsive. They're about as hard to lead when they're happy as when they're mad. That's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And in schools, they're frustrated. They don't know what to do with this child. Some of our children are born on drugs, that the mother was doing drugs, so you deal with some of that stuff. Some of this stuff is definitely not the child's fault. Some things have happened early on that's kind of created this in this child. But now this child is, 12, 13 years old, and he's going to have to take responsibility. He's going to have to learn to try to turn some of this stuff around. So that's really what camp is set up for, is to take those kind of boys and to live in a group where we start creating an opportunity for some change to happen. The kind of boys we do not take to camp are more boys that are, I would look at them, more delinquent, more criminal, more thug attitude. That's not camp. That's not who we are. We don't take boys like that. There are boys out there that are 12, 13, 14 years old that definitely have a more of a delinquent criminal attitude, and that's a boy that can premeditate. He can think ahead. He can strategize, plan. That's not, we don't want, it wouldn't work for those boys to be in our program for the way we operate. So our job as a family worker is to know and kind of get the feel of, through these phone calls and then through interviews, is this a boy that truly fits camp? Because he's going to come to camp and live in a group. There's 10 boys and 2 counselors that live down trail. So we have 4 groups, 4 campsites. And again, it's like going back 100 years down trail. There's no electricity down in campsite. There is up at the main office building and the dining hall, but down trail, there's no electricity. So when Helene came through and power was out for a week and a half, the boys never knew it. It didn't matter to them. But we had a big generator running our main building, so we were good to go there. But it really is we tell boys that come to camp, you're only coming to camp for 2 reasons. And, of course, some of the boys look at us like, well, man, my psychiatrist told me there's 50 reasons why I'm bad. And I said, no, there's only 2 reasons you're going to come to us. One is because you want help. He has to admit and have been led by his family or whatever where he does say, I want to change. I know I'm not making the greatest choices. Reason number 2 that we want him to understand why he's coming to camp is because he has to be willing to help the other 9 boys he's going to live with. And that's the fabric of group work. Group therapy really is I'd say it's the root of all therapies out there. There's a lot of individual therapy going on, and they do some group stuff maybe for an hour a week in some places. We just live it out 24/7, 6 weeks at a time, because every 6 weeks they do make a home visit to practice with their families at home. But they live in a group of 10 boys and 2 counselors, and we tell the boys, you're coming for those 2 reasons because you want help and you're willing to help the other boys, but here's the 2 rules of camp. And most of our boys don't like rules. They'll break them if they can. So we say we don't want many, we just want 2. 2 rules. One is everything you do, if you come to camp, everything you're going to do from when you wake up at 6:30 till you go to bed at night is going to be done with your group. You can, at no time can 2 boys just walk off and go do something else. We have 750 acres, but they have to move as a group. Everything they do has to be done as a group. Rule number 2 is what they do as a group, we want them to do with good attitudes. Now, these boys aren't choir boys, so we know they're not coming because they're good at having good attitudes. These boys are good at having bad attitudes, and they can, something can set them off in a heartbeat. So whenever that happens, the group stops what they're doing and circles up, and we talk about it. Might take 5 minutes, Might take a couple of hours. We hope it don't take all day. And it could be 10 o'clock in the morning. Could be 10 o'clock at night. We don't know. And it could happen 20 times a day that group circles up to talk about an attitude. Because when a problem comes up, the group's going to stop and address it right away. That is group therapy at its core. I mean, it sounds simple, but when you go live it, if I took 10 of you and we said we're going to live like that for 6 weeks, I want to tell you something. The first week or two, y'all would be nice to each other. Like, oh, sure, you can have the biggest piece. Yeah, go ahead. You can be first. But after a while, why are you being selfish? You're always thinking you got to have the first. And we'd probably get pretty honest with each other after a while if we had to live together 24/7, move as a team, do everything together, and then have good attitudes. Because, we just do have bad days sometimes. And what do we do with them? Who all does it affect? So what we're asking these boys to do is very, very powerful. It's humanly speaking, it shouldn't be done. You shouldn't be able to do it. But with God, you can. And it really is. There's been programs have tried to do what we're doing, secular programs. They're like, wow, a wilderness camp, outdoors. They buy a bunch of land. They get it started. They bring in the wrong boys. They do bring in more criminals, thugs, and then they have staff out of college that have degrees to do some of this, and they're burning them out in 3 months, and after a while they shut the door. They're like, it doesn't work. And it's because there's no God. They don't have God in it. There's nothing spiritual about it. So I thank God back where Floyd, granddad we called him, Harvey Yoder, based on their experience of wanting to start something that absolutely God was front and center. It was all about living out the gospel for people that are calling us and saying we want help. We don't have to knock on doors and tell them we have something to give them. They're calling us and begging us to help them with their son. So it is an honor. It's an opportunity just to come alongside each of the boys and families. However, out of probably every 10 phone calls that we get, maybe one boy actually comes to camp. Because of just the criteria, our waiting list. Some folks need help yesterday. Our waiting list, we're always full. It can be 4 to 6 months out before we actually, from that first phone call, before we get a boy in. Sometimes it can go up to a year. So that family has to know how to kind of hang with us in that journey as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through the pictures, and then if there are, and talk some as we go, but if there's questions at any time, feel free to throw up your hand, and I'll answer it, and I can also open it up then afterwards if there's some questions that you have. Okay, are we ready? There we go. This is just to show where we're at the arrow isn't coming up. There was supposed to be an arrow. Because we are up in the northwest corner, right up in the corner of South Carolina is where we're at. There we go. There comes the arrow. To serve the state of South Carolina, we're actually not in a very good place. We should be more in Columbia area to serve South Carolina. But I'm really, really grateful that this place was chosen. That was before I came along. But it's beautiful. It's in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains that run from Maine to Georgia. And so it's just the natural resources around us are much nicer there than what we have anywhere else in the state. So, but there are families that live out here at Myrtle Beach. We have some in Savannah, Charleston. And so they've got 5 hours to get up there to camp. And they have to be committed. So there's some people that have to be able to do some traveling to work with camp. On the home visits, local families will come and pick their boy up at camp for those every 6 weeks. But we also do take some boys to Columbia for the low-lying areas. We will do that so that they don't have to drive as far to come get their boys. So we'll do that. But every 4 months, every family has to come to camp, drive the whole way, come to camp, and then do an evaluation conference where we actually go over the boys' goals, because every boy has 5 goals, 3 behavior goals, an educational goal, and a fun goal. And we actually will go over those goals to make sure the chiefs do a pretty extensive report, and just to know that we're on track with where we're going with this boy. And that happens every 4 months. Some staff pictures. Oh, that would help. That would really help. Yeah, turn it on makes a difference. Then she don't have to run it. Okay. Oh, going backwards. Okay, let's go the other way. All right, here we got it. Just show you a few staff pictures. Daniel and Faith he's our executive director, and he's a Northern Indiana guy too. He'd have been, grew up in Fairhaven Church, Daniel Hostetler. So he's been with camp now, wow, it's 20 and a few years as well. He's been with us a long time. Their family keeps growing. They would have adopted little D about 4 years ago, so he's kind of the life of the party with them. Our program director is Andrew Smoker and his wife Joanna, and she does happen to be one of our daughters. I kind of had a pretty good vetting process with my two daughters. They both married chiefs, and I got to watch these guys in the woods for 2 years. So when they asked about being interested in my daughter, I was like, yeah, go ahead. That's great. I seen you could handle that group of boys, so I guess you can raise a family. So that was pretty special. Andrew had been from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, but he is our program director and doing a great job with that. We have some supervisors. These guys would have been in the group and been chiefs and now got married and are living there on the property. Terrell and Christina and Brandon and Sarah. And then we have Mitchell and Brittany and Todd and Karina. So we always have 4 young guys that would have been counselors, now are married, but starting their families, but they are in and out of those groups a lot. The number one thing that's so important with a ministry like this is support. I mean, you can't just put these guys on the front line, the counselors. You can't just put these guys out there and say, figure it out. Because you're working with 10 boys that have figured out a whole lot more than you ever will. And they'll take you places you don't want to go and don't need to go because it's not healthy. Not that they're not, I mean, they can be mean-spirited, but it's not that it's so much a physical threat as it is just they're very manipulative. They have learned when you go into survivor mode at a very young age, you're just going to learn how to cover yourself and get through life without really taking any responsibility. So supporting our front line is really, really important, and these guys do a great job with that. Drew is our educational coordinator and his family. Drew would have not been a counselor. He's actually from the local area. He is from employed by the public school system by Oconee County. Because when the boys come to camp, obviously we have to keep the educational parts going, but we do that kind of ongoing and out of everything that we do. I kind of liken it to homeschooling on steroids. I mean, we get to just use our 750 acres, sometimes South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia as our classroom. We get to the boys get some pretty awesome experiences, and it is all educational. But he does keep up with educational requirements that we do, so he's very helpful there. Here's my family. My wife Carolyn there in the middle, and then we have 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls, and 15 grandchildren now. There's a few this was a couple years ago, so a few are not on there. So Carolyn would have been from southern Michigan, so that's where I was at. Came down this morning to be with you all. They're in Hillsdale, Michigan is where she'd have been from. So it's been a blessing to just all of our family, just raise them in South Carolina. Now, our oldest does live in Florida. Second one became a Canadian, lives in Lethbridge, Alberta. Our third child, she married a cowboy from Great Falls, Montana. And then the other 3 children do live in our area. So most of our grandchildren do not live there. Thank God for FaceTime and video chat and to be able to travel and go see them. But it's been a blessing. Josh and Andrew Yoder, he is a family worker as well that works with families, and so is Malin. He'd be the top left there in the back. Malin Stolzhus is a family worker. This is his family. So our cooks in the kitchen right now are Jalee, Darlene, and Shannon. And again, food is it's a big deal. Some of these boys have never eaten right, just because some of their families, the way they cook, the way they the food they make, the eating out and whatever. So feeding them well, and we tell the girls, the cooks, you're probably dealing with the biggest chunk of our budget of anybody else at camp. Our grocery bill in a year is probably close to 115, 120,000 that we spend on groceries, but it's very important. These boys are out there burning energy, living outdoors, and feeding them well. That's one complaint we never hear is anything against the food. They fuss at us about a lot of other things, but if they fuss about the food, boy, there's other boys in the group that get on them pretty hard about that. But the cook is, this role is an opportunity. Miss Jolie on the right, she actually is our head cook. That's a long-term commitment. But then we do have 2 VS opportunities, and that's for 18 months that girls would come and serve in that way. So if there's any girls here and you love to cook and you want to cook for a bunch, why, that's a great opportunity to do that at camp. The office where we do our meetings out of is there on the property, and we would have Angie Berkshire, and some of y'all would probably know her, and Deborah Miller. Deborah would have been from Colorado, but Angie would have been from up here in this area, or northern Indiana. And they had to do a picture to do a big thank you to Main Street Roasters for keeping us fueled in the office, because they like the coffee that comes in there, and so they had to specifically do a picture. I think a couple bags just came in the other day. So when Angie found out I'm coming up here, she said, well, she's got to get a picture put in there. They love that. So Chuck Wagon is where our main where the dining hall experience, where the boys will come in and eat their meals. The kitchen's to the left, the dining hall's to the right there. 5 days a week, the boys all come up here to eat their meals. Again, we tell boys, we're not a boot camp or a military school, that we have no interest in being that. But we are very structured and organized. You have to have structure. These boys need structure in their lives. Any child that has a lot of emotional dysregulation, you better develop some structure in their life, or you're going to pay for it, because they're going to, again, be all over the place. So camp is very structured in how we do it, but we want to do it in such a way that the boys have involvement. They actually buy in. They have ownership. The more you can get any person to have ownership, the less reaction you're going to have, because they're going to actually make it a part of who they are and what they want. So Chuck Wagon's a neat experience. All 4 groups come up to eat their meals in Chuck Wagon, and then it is a time that they also let each other know what their plans are, what their activities are. So there's never physical like mingling with each other, but they do know each other in other groups, and they talk to each other from their table. As far as in the sharing time, somebody will share what the group's been doing to keep everybody informed. So if one group is learning something pretty awesome, say a trip they're planning, they get to share that experience with the other 3 groups. And that's really neat for accountability, and also just while one's learning, let's all learn. So that's great. Going down trail towards campsite, a lot of trail systems that have to be maintained, kept up. Camp is very opposite as for what you guys, especially dads, want for your home. In your home, you want a low-maintenance home. I mean, you want to make that you build it, put it together, and you hope nothing breaks. You want that home to be low maintenance. Camp, we want it to be high maintenance. We want things to wear out, have to be redone over and over and over, because every boy that comes, we want him to have to participate in the redoing and the rebuilding. And so you'll see that as we go into campsite. Camp, this is not built to for years to just stay as is. No, it's going to have to be rebuilt. Now, the trail systems stay there, but the trail logs rot out. They have to be redone. A bridge like that will last maybe 4 or 5 years. Our tent structures that we build in campsite, we call them tents, but they're kind of like tent cabin-like things. They just out of pine trees. And again, they have to go out and cut all these things by hand. We don't have any power saws besides the power in their arm, and then we have little 2-man saws. They'll go out and cut these trees down. They'll use a draw knife, skin the bark off, and then use a bracing bit and a hammer and chisel to notch them. And before they even build a tent, or a tent needs to be replaced, they'll actually draw up a blueprint. The group will draw up a blueprint of what they want to see the next tent look like. And then they will actually, once they have all their measurements, the size poles they need, then they'll actually start going out and cutting trees down and start the process of rebuilding. In the top right, that picture is a tent that's been winterized. So already in October, they already started winterizing the tents, putting plastic where it's open, and then they hook up a wood-burning stove, and that's what they use for heat in the wintertime. In the summer, they'll take that all apart, and then it's like the picture to the bottom right, sleeping tent. It's just open in the summer. So in the summertime, they do rig up their own summer showers in campsite. Again, there's no climate control down trail, so when it's a 90, 95 degree day, it's a good way to cool off with cold water. And that's what they use in the summertime to take showers down trail. Their wood corral area, every campsite's got a place to cut, split wood. Again, they want to get that wood tent full for the winter. And so it's all done by hand. They'll actually take wood and make kindling. So they'll split it down even smaller, and they'll even make shavings. They'll actually use a draw knife and shave a log to make shavings so they can quickly get fires going. So we're starting fires a lot. And again, sometimes we get a boy at camp that when we talk about fire building and making fires, the parents like, that he's kind of he started some fires inappropriately, and you really, I don't know if you should be doing that. And we're like, we absolutely will. We're not going to back off. The boy needs to learn that fire is a tool. It's not a weapon of mass destruction. It can be, but that's not what it's used for. And all boys are kind of curious of fires. I mean, I've seldom met a boy that doesn't like to go out and mess with a match or something to start a fire and learn. So teaching the boys the appropriateness of fire building is really important. And it works out. It works out great. We haven't had a camper yet in 45 years that's become an arsonist leaving camp. So it's worked out just fine. Some of their tools that they have, some of you old-timers will recognize some of these. Just the brace and bit draw knives, the little bow saw hanging up top there. They'll use some of those to do some of their work. Here, if they're cutting bigger stuff, they'll actually use the bigger saws. I tell people the kind of saws you see people paint pictures on. We pull them out and use them for this here. And we do have a maintenance man that does a great job sharpening these, setting the teeth. I tell you, it makes it's an art. Again, learning how to set and have sharp saws. But you get two boys that don't really get along with each other on either end of this saw, you're probably going to have a problem, because these are saws that you pull, you don't push. One guy's got to pull, then the other guy's got to pull, then the other guy pull. And so if they're not cooperating, oh, believe me, it's great. So when Chief goes to cut wood like this, sometimes he'll team two guys up that he don't get along. I mean, Chief don't try to make his life easy most times. I mean, once in a while he tries to, but a lot of times you're doing stuff to deliberately not cause a problem, but push guys to have to learn to get along. The other thing we do is if there's a couple guys that really are struggling just getting along with each other, we'll make them be in the same tent, where they first thing in the morning they have to get up and start working together to get that tent done. So again, rather than backing away, because there is no separating them, we are going to live together as a group, but even making them live a little closer is okay. Here, a boy's using a draw knife, skinning some of the bark off, and they're carrying some poles in the campsite. Here's just some tent structures being built. Again, very simple. If a group makes a mistake, cuts a pole too short or something, it's not the end of the world. It's not like a big expense. It's just they got to go out and cut another tree down, skin it out, and get the right pole. We don't have to go to the lumber yard to get more lumber. So it really is an economical way to teach the boys a lot of neat basic skills. And there are boys that are men now, of course, and they say that was the catalyst for them in what they've experienced doing carpentry and whatever, just learning how to build a tent down at campsite, as basic as it is. 2 days a week, they do their own cooking in campsite. I'd mentioned up at the main dining hall, 5 days a week they come in there to eat, but 2 days a week they eat in campsite. Each group has their own cook tent, and they just cook over an open hearth. We do use the Dutch ovens and the cast iron a lot. That's the chiefs and the boys get really good at cooking with that. And you can bake anything in those Dutch ovens that you would in your oven at home. You just regulate it with coals. Then they have the wash, sterilize, and rinse, and mom's not there to do the dishes, so the boys have to jump in and take their turn to do the dishes after those meals. Here, one of the chiefs is helping prepare a meal with a boy, and there's usually a chief and two boys, and the boys always take turns coming in and helping with a meal, but all the boys get turns at it. But again, there's a lot of good educational stuff that goes into making a meal. A great way to learn some fractions is when you need a third of a cup. What does that mean? What does it look like? How much of that do you need? So, through that, and even learning fractions with tent building, learning, there's boys that don't know what those little marks are between 1 and 2 inches. What are those little things? And to just help them start understanding that you can learn fractions right off of that. It all comes together. So it's just neat for the practical things that boys can learn. The boys do make their menu the week before. They'll always make 6 menus and then turn them into the cooks, and then the cooks will buy the food and have them ready to take down trail when it comes time to do the meals. So that's the way it works. And again, the boys, when they make out their menus, it's something that the whole group has to agree upon. Now, they'll divvy out the boys to actually write it all out, but the group kind of agrees on the general meal, and then when they go to actually fill it out, they're budgeted. They can only spend so much on each meal. And the budget comes to about I think it's $205, $206 per boy per meal. So it means that they have to, over their 6 menus, for 12 people, it was like $24.60, I think, $24.60 per meal is about what it would come to feed 12 people. Y'all moms are into that. You could do that. Pretty simple. It can be done. That's about that's what it comes to. But what they can do, you can do a really good breakfast for about $18. So then they can use the leftover of that for a dinner and spend maybe $30 and a few dollars. So we just tell them, we don't care how you do it, but over your 6 menus, when you do all the math, it's got to come to about $206 per person per meal. So it's really neat to watch them get creative. And obviously, we are also involved with a food bank that we're able to get food in, and that really helps the boys with getting food that it doesn't cost as much. We can pass some of that stuff on to them. So that's been fun to do that. But the biggest thing is, and again, we have some guys, grown men, that actually do catering services, and they said, boy, I tell you what, I use my menu planning all the time in my business, on my work, because down trail, when I learned how to make menus and order food and try to get it as cheap as possible, the most for as cheap as possible, he said, boy, I use that all the time now. So it's neat to see what applies. Here are boys actually cooking over the fire. They do make some, like I said, in the Dutch ovens, they can make anything. They make some really good pizzas. I think this guy was stir-frying some chicken to make some chicken pizza there. The dish rack, they do have a place to keep their dishes down trail, just right outside. They make an open-air dish rack, and we get inspected by DHEC, and they want us to keep them outside because we're not climate controlled. So if you keep them in a cupboard in one of the tents, you're going to have more issue with mold or things not being as sanitary, because they will sterilize them before they use them anyhow. So that's the process. The chuck tent is a place where they eat down trail in campsite, and here are boys setting the table, and again, the boys take turns doing that. But the other thing this table gets used a lot for is a lot of reading, writing, and math, but it's more on the go. They can write letters home. They write letters home every week to their family. Here a group is planning. We're probably the only school in the world that lets the group, with the 2 counselors leading it, but they literally plan all their activities for the next week as well. From when they wake up in the morning to they go to bed at night. They're going to plan all their work schedules. They're going to plan the games they're going to play. They're going to plan everything. And that's really, really important to help these boys learn how to think ahead, and because we tell them, once you have a good set of plans in place, you're either doing one of 2 things. Either what you said you wanted to do, or you're sitting in a circle talking about why you're not doing it. And that's because somebody's got an attitude. Somebody's got a bad attitude. So let's get the attitude solved, and let's get back to what we said we wanted to do. So again, if we can get boys to take ownership in plans and in what needs to be done, there's a lot less fight when it comes time to do it, because they had say-so in wanting this is what they help plan. If I would come up with a set of plans for a week, go down and give it to every group, they'd either maybe get excited about it or they'd tell me a lot of bad names, tell me where to go, because they're not going to do it. It would instantly cause an attitude in a boy. But you get them, and this planning process isn't necessarily easy. To try to get 10 boys and 2 counselors to be on the same page about everything we're going to do this next week, try that in your family one time and see what happens. And you can't leave each other. You got to stay together all the time. So, but it really is effective, and it works to help the boys stay on track with what we're doing. pH area, that's what the little sign says there. Personal hygiene, this is just a wash-up area is what this is. It's got a hydrant there in the middle. It's kind of hard to see. Mirror, but on the rails, every boy's got his toothbrush, toothpaste, and a cup, and they can brush. We do brush their teeth about 4 times a day. It's after they wake up and after every meal. There are boys that come to camp, obviously. A lot of 11, 12, 13-year-olds really think they're allergic to water and they don't want to brush their teeth, and they kind of act like that's wasting time doing anything to hygiene-wise. So we say, no, we're living out in the woods, but we can get dirty, but we're going to clean up, and we can brush our teeth. We can be appropriate. So that's kind of a good call. But again, can you think about doing all this together, 12 people in there brushing their teeth at the same time? That gets exciting. I mean, if you want to get ornery and aggravating on somebody, just accidentally maybe spit your toothpaste out and it hits his shoe or whatever. It's supposed to go right there in the middle. It's supposed to go right into those rocks. There's a drain. But, boys will be boys. And so there's just problems that can come up over anything. I mean, you just don't know. Somebody looks at somebody wrong, and we got a problem. So going into their sleeping tents, we have 4 sleeping tents. The counselors do have a tent. They have their own tent, and then the other 3 tents would be 10 boys. So there's a 4-man and 2 3-man tents, and this is kind of what it looks like in a tent. Very basic. We tell boys we're not going to bring a bunch of their stuff from home. We just want clothes, and we're ready to go. That we got the rest of it. Again, because organization, most boys that struggle, again, with impulsivity and the kind of boys we serve, typically do not have a very neat room. I mean, it looks like a hurricane just went through for the most part. Once in a while, we have a boy that actually can be a little bit the other way. He's actually very obsessive compulsive issues, and I mean we had one boy that wanted to come to camp and bring a whole bunch of sanitary stuff that he can put on his hands all the time, and we said, no, you can't do that. He was just worried about getting dirt on him, and we said, no, we're going to get you dirty. You are going to get dirty. So, but that's rare to get a boy like that. Most of our boys, they'll roll in the mud and they just don't even want to clean up. They just don't care. So helping them learn how to take care of themselves, take care of the clothes in a foot locker. We do wash their clothes every week. All the boys will keep their clothes separate. Then we will wash and dry them, but they have to bring them down to campsite, put them on their bed, and fold them, and then put them in their foot locker. And and their foot lockers are all organized. We show them how to organize their foot locker. And again, even back to bed making, there's 100 ways to make a bed. And some people argue that bed making really shouldn't happen. And there might be some in here that would say that. They say it's like tying your shoe. When you take your shoe off, you don't retie it, and then when you go back to use it, untie it and get back in it, do you? You actually take your shoe off and you leave it untied. So why would you not get out of your bed and leave it unmade, right? I see some guys, they like that. Here's the deal. This is the first thing. It is one of the first activities you can do in the morning when you get up that you can look back on and say, job well done. It's just one of the first things you can do. And we take bed making to a very serious level, because not that it's going to be graded, and we don't make boys, we just want to know he's doing it the best he knows how. But if a boy gets up and refuses to make his bed, that whole group isn't going anywhere. I mean, we got to help this boy. At some point, some other guys might help him to get him through that attitude, but every boy is going to learn how to get up, and we actually make them strip the covers off their bed, strip the sheets off, flip the mattress, and start from scratch. Every boy does that every morning. Now, we do that for two reasons. One is because there's no climate control. It's to flip the mattress, keep it fresh. But reason number two, that's probably even a little bit more important, there's boys that are slick enough to know that if I don't need to flip this thing and take it all apart, I will freeze laying on top rather than making this bed in the morning. I'll lay right on top of here, and I don't care. So we're like, no, get in. Mess the bed up. Get in, because you are going to have to take everything off and flip it and redo it anyhow. So it is a way to kind of make that has to happen. But we choose this way. We just make a collar, roll a collar back, make a little V-corner in the back, fold the blankets in, fold the top blankets. It's, again, we tell boys there's 100 ways to make a bed. This is our way. And when they go on home visits, they don't have to do it this way, but we actually do encourage that they and the parents to actually start realizing that their room, what their responsibilities are in their room, are really, really important to help that structure and routine happen. I've had a few parents that on my first interview with them, and we talked about this subject, the parents said, well, we don't make our bed. Does that mean we're going to need to now if he goes to camp? And I'm like, no, I can't make you do that. I said, you would be encouraging to him if you did. And I've had a few that from that day forward, literally even the waiting period and until that boy came in, they started making their bed. And to this day, they still are. They're like, you know what? If my boy was going to do it, we are too. Not that it's going to fix everything, but it's a beginning of something. And that's where bed making is. If you want to watch something, some of y'all might have seen it. Years back, there was a Navy SEAL. He's got a little book out, To Make My Bed. And he literally did a commencement speech, and he talked about everything that he went through in Navy SEAL training. But he did talk about the importance of making that bed and why the military makes that such a big deal. So it's a neat book. I think it's on YouTube too if you want to watch him. Problem solving, we choose 4 steps of problem solving, and we tell boys if you can learn this, you can do this anywhere in the world as long as you can speak their language. But you got to identify the problem, list the possible solutions, pick a solution, talk about prevention, and we might do that 20 times a day. Walk boys through that and help boys know that the only good thing about a problem is to solve it. I mean, I haven't found another good thing to do with any problem that comes up. And it's not just an attitude problem. It could be when we're building a tent, how to figure out an angle or something that needs to be done. You all are problem solving many times during the day that sometimes you don't even think about it because it just kind of happens. You're like thinking this thing through. But obviously when there is an attitude that comes up, we want to help them through this. And a lot of times people get stuck on number 1 if it's an attitude problem because they hate to admit they're a part of it. You take the boy that's great at manipulating, and he has pushed the blame everywhere. They're really good at it. They were pros. So a lot of positive relationships happen with Chief and the boys. Just neat experiences that happen. We do have chapel Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. And again, we tell boys we don't want to just help you physically, mentally, and emotionally. We spiritually is the ultimate goal. And there's probably nothing, I know there's not, nothing more powerful than a chief down in the woods with his group, and after he's putting the boys to bed, one of the boys says, Chief, can I talk to you? And the conversation goes to where he wants to accept Jesus in his heart. And the counselor leads him to the Lord. There's nothing that'll put a price tag on it. That chief about don't want to go to bed that night. He's so amped up. It's just a powerful thing because to see these boys get deliverance from some of the past and some of the hurt and some of the garbage that they were in and some stuff that wasn't their fault and then some stuff's been, it's just neat to watch them change and to make that happen. So the whole spiritual component of camp, it's so interwoven that the boys, they know coming in there's something religious here. They sense that. They know that. In fact, I had a boy join my group when I was a chief, and he right away told me within the first day or two, he said, Chief Paul, he said, I don't want to hear nothing about this God stuff. And I was like, okay, that's fine. In my mind, I'm like, man, I got 18 months with you. We don't need to jump on that right now. We got time. But I just like, okay, that's fine. I didn't think nothing more of it. Just kind of took care of him, lived with him. And In 3 weeks, within 3 weeks, as I was putting him to bed, and Chiefs often, when the boys are going to bed, they'll come around and tuck them in and just kind of make sure their needs are all met. And I was coming around, and he's like, this boy, very boy, he said, Chief Paul, can I talk to you? I said, yeah. So I come over by his bed, and he's like, Chief Paul, he said, do you think my grandpa went to heaven? Now, it's going to be hard to talk about heaven without talking about God. But he asked me if I think his grandpa went to heaven. So I just sat beside his bed there, and I said, well, tell me about Grandpa. Tell me what you know. And he started just sharing about Grandpa, and through that, we got to talk about God. There's no way a boy can go through camp and not at some point ask a question or open the door for you to talk about God, because we're just kind of out in God's creation and living it out to where they're going to ask. And for the most part, the boys that come to camp, they're not scared to ask questions. They will ask anything. We have a little store at camp, a little trading post where boys actually, they get $5 a week to put into their account. We don't give them cash. It just goes in an account. And they actually have to buy their personal needs that they need every week, and then they can save up money for stuff that they want, because there is, fishing gear, carving equipment. There's a lot of stuff in there that makes boys just kind of want to go after it. But they have to first meet, soap, shampoo, toothbrush, toothpaste, meet their needs, and then save up for their wants. And we actually make little checkbooks for them that they actually write out checks. So again, it's a way of teaching money management even as part of impulse control. Learning, we have some boys that I'm telling you, they want to spend it down to the last penny. They're figuring out how to spend it every week. But then we have some boys, we got a couple of guys in our youngest group that literally have over $100 in their savings account, because this is their checking account. And once the boy has $25 in his checking, he can move it into a savings account, and then we will give him 10% interest on his money every month. And so we want these guys to learn, look, if you can save, you can actually, your money can make you money, and then you can pull it out whenever you need to back into your checking to buy some things once you've saved up. But whatever they have in their savings and checking, when they graduate, does turn into cash. They get to take it home. So this little boy is just saving to take it home. He's gonna do it. The other thing on our property is a lake. We do have a lake at Che, swimming. Again, some boys come to camp, don't know how to swim, just a confidence builder, and teaching that. Fishing back there as well. Some things we do off of our property is hiking, canoeing, and the bus trips that we do off of our property. So we have all the gear to go hiking trails. We'll hike up to 2 weeks that we can do a trail, 70-some miles. We have some awesome trails right north of us, and the group just has to plan what trail, plan the menus. We do have a dehydrator, and we're just fixing to buy a freeze dryer, which is going to be really exciting to actually freeze dry some food that packs so much easier. But again, there's a lot of science goes into that, and a lot of teaching for the boys to learn how to prepare meals and do meals on certain trips. Canoe trips, we do rivers all the way from the Suwannee River in Florida to the James River in Virginia. We have had a group up on the Potomac, up by Maryland and Pennsylvania, out west to the Missouri River. We've had them. So river trips, again, are just basically if a chief and a group gets excited about a certain area and a certain trip they want to do, we do canoe trips up to 3 weeks long. On a hiking trip, we will resupply that group every 3 days with more supplies, because they can only carry so much. On a canoe trip, we resupply them halfway through. So if it's a 3-week trip, we'll do it in a week and a half. We'll bring them more supplies because they can't. And usually on a canoe trip, there's 12 people and a week and a half of supply of food and all their gear, and they typically take about 4 canoes. So we're talking about, you don't have a lot of margin when you're in the water. It's not a good, it's a place to stay calm. It's a good way to teach a boy that thinks he can't hold still. Oh, yeah, you can, because if you don't, this thing's going over, and it's not going to be pretty. Some people aren't going to like that. So that's great. Bus trips, like I said, they will plan. This is more of an educational trip. This group was studying the Civil War. So they literally got to go the eastern United States. They had worked for 6 months ahead of time, writing letters to chambers of commerces, museums, and places. So there's a lot of work goes into a bus trip, and it is more of a public trip where you're out in the public. So a group has to be ready for that, to know that they can handle problems and be out and be okay with doing that. Every night before we go to bed, whether we're at camp or on a trip, doesn't matter where we're at, we're going to do powwow, and this is where we sit around the fire, talk about the day, close it out. It's evaluation time, just looking back. Again, like I mentioned with planning, if we can help boys plan ahead, we also want to help boys learn to look back and take information from the past to say, was it good or bad? What can we do better tomorrow? Before we go to bed, let's know what we learned today so that we can make tomorrow better. And we sing some songs, have prayer. After this, we go to our tents, and we just have lanterns for light, get the boys tucked into bed, blow the lanterns out, and just listen to the night sounds until morning. For every boy at camp, obviously our focus is graduation, and we know it's going to take about 18 months. We don't set a date. When a boy comes into camp, there's 9 boys there, right? In his journey of 18 months, every one of those 9 boys are going to graduate, and there's going to be another boy coming in behind every one. So he's going to impact 18 lives. 9 boys are going to leave. By the time he is the last one, by the time it's time for him to leave, there's 9 other boys that have come into camp since he has. So we don't have a level system. We purposely don't want to try to do a behavior modification program, because some of these boys would be sharp enough to do just whatever they need to get through. And we don't want that to happen. We want them to change from the inside out. So we tell a boy, when you first come, we know we're going to put a lot of energy into you to help get you started and start changing some of your attitudes. About halfway through camp, we expect him to be solving at least as many problems as he's causing. And then the last part of his camp stay, he should be solving more problems than he's causing. And that's actually what makes camp work. It's not about a boy that's fixing to leave is no better than the boy that just came yesterday. What a boy has to say brand new boy, what he has to say in that group, circle up. His word might not mean as much because we don't know him yet. We can't trust him. We don't know what he's really like. But if he's saying truth, we better listen. And sometimes a new person has more truth than a guy that's been there a while, because he's kind of gotten used to what's been happening in the group. So that's group work that you have to keep leveled out. I just threw a couple shots in here of just lately what we did. We often do a harvest day. We have an apple cider press. We made probably over 100 gallons of apple cider. We had a big vat for apple butter. We made probably 30 gallons of apple butter. Again, a neat process for the boys just to participate in, help with. They'd never experienced something like that before. So that's just a neat thing. Had a big pot of stew that we were making for our lunch that day. So just a lot of fun outdoor stuff that can happen. The other thing that camp has that are serving opportunities, we do have thrift stores. We have this is the one in Seneca. We also have one in Westminster that's a smaller one. And great place. We usually have about 6 girls and about 4 guys that are serving in those roles at the stores working. We have a separate place for them to live that they would work at these stores. Our thrift stores, we have discovered, is an incredible ministry. Besides camp, it's just to the outside community for them to be able to be connected to camp. We have people that say, I want to help some way. I want to come to camp and help. Well, there's really no way they can come help from the community, but if they donate to the stores and help through that, it's a big help, and the stores have done really, really well in helping the fun boys through camp. Our staff needs for 2025 are, every year we about need 4 chiefs, because chiefs come for 2 years, so obviously, when a chief leaves, the other chief's been there a year, so we'll have some chief needs February, May, September, October. Chiefs do need to be 21 or over, and they do have to have a high school diploma or a GED. They don't have to have college, but they do have to have one or the other there. And obviously, it's just for our chiefs, it is something that we want to know that God has kind of put that on your heart, and it's a desire that something that you want. And I think young people, if you're in here and you're 10, 11, 12 years old, If camp's still there when you're 21, guess what? Go ahead and start praying about if God would have you. I know God laid it on my heart when I was about 13 that I got really excited about being a chief one day. So it's even, don't feel like, well, I'm too young to think about it. It's great to, if God lays it on your heart for that. For cooks, in the fall of 25, we would have some openings for some cooks, and then thrift store guys and girls opening starting in January. We could use some pretty directly here if there's and for the thrift store, I believe they encourage 18 months, but there are some that do it for 15 and some a little bit shorter. But they try to go for an 18-month commitment. And the cooks, it's 18 months as well. And then our chiefs is 2 years. So that's kind of the way that works. The only other thing I'll mention yet is just a little bit funding-wise how camp works. Camp is at this point, there's just no funding coming in at all from the government, from the state. We are totally from our thrift stores, from donors, from fundraisers, and then each family that privately places their boy, which all of them are at this point, we do ask them to give towards the tuition that it's going to cost to put a boy through camp. It will cost us as a ministry, and we tell every family this, that it will cost us $2,200 to put the boy through the program. But rarely are you going to find a family that says, oh, no problem, we got that. So we tell them the finances are not going to be an issue. We're not going to do a sliding scale on your income. We're not going to ask even for a minimum. If all the other criteria is in place, they're committed, the boy seems to fit, it's the right, looks like camp could be the right place for him. Upon entry into camp, we just have that family make a commitment of what's realistic for them at where they're at towards that $2,200. And for some single moms, it might be $25. It might be $50. We have some couples that'll do $500. Some might do $1,000. But we do not let money be an issue. We are not, and I've more than once, I'm on the phone with a mom. I've never met her. I'm just talking to her. She's asking about camp. She's needing help. She's told me everything about her boy. And I'll say, well, I've answered all of her questions. And then at the end, I'll say, was there anything else you are wondering about? And she hates to ask it, but she says, what about the payment? She said, other places I've called, I can't afford it. And I just say, you know what? This is going to be very different. I said, our board has told us to not let money be an issue. So money cannot be a criteria for you. Your boy can come to camp if all this other stuff is in place. And oftentimes it just gets quiet and she's starting to cry. She's just like, she said, I'm sorry. I've just never heard of anything like it. And I said, well, there'll be people, businesses, people out there that you'll never meet that are going to help your boy go through camp. And she's just so grateful. Because there are places, there's one pretty close to us, that is literally $10,000 a month to get help for their boy. I mean, that's the basic. Then if you want extra counseling in that place, it's going to be thousands more. It's unbelievable. So camp, $2,200 a month it seems like a lot. I mean, it's not something that any of us can just say, oh, sure, we can do that. But we are able to keep some of our costs down, obviously with our chiefs being in service, some of our VS staff, and then just basic, the way we live. But it's still it does cost in what we're doing. But it's neat to help families not let the cost be an issue. So again, God has provided in amazing ways beyond we can even imagine in the last 5-10 years. It's just been neat because at one point we didn't think camp could exist without government help, and it can. It does. It's doing very well, and we're very grateful for that. So we want to thank you guys as well. Just your prayers, your interest, not just in camp, but the many missions. I tell families or tell congregations, camp is just one little tool that's out there, and I'm grateful that it can be there. We want to be faithful as long as we can do what we're doing, but continue to serve, and there's so many other areas to serve and to be a part of, and that's why I like to encourage young people, be praying where God wants to use you. And don't use your teen years as years of just waiting till you get old enough to go, because sometimes when you're in your teen years, especially 13, 14, 15 years old, you can feel like I'm too old to be a child, but I'm not old enough to be a youth, and I'm just kind of doing time. Until I get through. Well, don't do that. God can use you in a powerful way to keep developing you and helping you prepare you for what is out ahead. So there's a lot of purpose in those teen years, and it's neat as families to be able to help each other with that. I'll just open up a little bit for questions. If there's anything that you're wondering about, go ahead. Yep. No, we do from South Carolina primarily, most of ours, but we do go into North Carolina a little bit as well, and then over to Georgia, some of Georgia, because we're so close. I mean, we're only 20 miles from North Carolina, and then about 5 miles from Georgia. So we do parts of those, but we don't. If I get a call from somebody at the beach, like Williamston over in North Carolina, they're like 6 hours away, 7 hours, I don't take them. I say, you're just too far away. But anything within 4 to 5 hours we will take, typically, if they can make the trip as well, if they can travel some too. What was the other one? It's much, much better. Yeah, it is. That's what our whole goal and focus is from the day one. I would liken it by the time a boy comes to camp, this is the boy, this is his family. I would feel like this boy's heart is closed up, the family's heart's closed up, and they're kind of trying to do life like this. And they love there's a love there, but there's a lot of love lost too. And so there's kind of a love-hate relationship. There's just a lot of hurt. I've never been a mom, but for 2 years we did take a boy into our home that was from camp that had a really, really hard beginning, and he did camp, lost his family, had nowhere to go, and after he was done at camp, we brought him into our home for 2 years, and watching my wife go through trying to be mom to him. Now this boy was almost 15 when he joined us, so I mean there's a lot of water over the dam, but this boy truly could say I love you. In fact, him and we'd give each other a hug every night, and I'd say love you, Bryson. He said love you, Dad. He started calling us mom and dad right away, but he didn't know what love was. And to watch Carolyn try to love him and then just get that wall, and he wasn't like, I mean, it could have been a lot worse, but I'm telling you, a mother that has been, when her love is not received, and it's just kind of, and then sometimes blatantly thrown back, and you've been squashed and pushed down and rubbed in the dirt, it's hard. It is hard. And think of yourself as a single mom. You have no support, nobody to turn to. I mean, they're at their wits' end. So our whole focus is to get these hearts to open back up. And that's got to be God. It's got to be God. But open up, and not just open up, but then come together. I mean, the most beautiful thing, and we tell boys this, the most beautiful thing is when you and your parents open up and you're able to you're safe when you guys can embrace in that way. So to what degree all that happens, again, it's really up to each case and individual, but we see a lot of opening up that happens. And there's parents that said they never would have thought it could happen for where they found themselves in. And there's doctors, psychiatrists, these boys have been medicated. That's the world's answer. The world doesn't know what to do. So they just come up with the next drug to try to get them to, I mean, there's stuff given to the boys to slow them down, and there's stuff given to speed them up. There's stuff to put them to sleep, it's hard to get one to wake up. They don't really have a wake-up drug. That doesn't happen. But it's just crazy what's out there. And we're not anti-drug, but we sure aren't favorable. Our goal is to help boys get medication-free in their journey. There's not a better place in the world for them than camp to come, and in the setting of that group to get off all their behavior meds and to see what skills they can learn to replace it. So it's neat. We do follow up with boys for about 6 months after they graduate, but that's mainly just as a support, phone calls. We can pick them up, take them out for lunch, but then after 6 months, we kind of let it up to them if they want to contact us, and some of them do. Some stay in touch fairly regular, but we just kind of let that up to them. But other questions? Yeah. We do at times. Yeah, we do, and it's through the boy. That boy literally goes home, and he's like, we need to go to church. We need to go to church. And we have a mom and a stepdad specifically, and this mom was really hurt back when she was a girl, in a religious setting. She was very much taken advantage. She was so bitter about church, she wasn't ever going to darken another door. And her boy came to camp, went through the journey, became a believer, and just at one of our meetings, we do parent group meetings every 6 weeks that us family workers meet with just the parents. And in one of those meetings, another mom said in that meeting, looked at the other parents and said, her boy had graduated already, but she looked at them and she said, you need to get into church. You need to get your boy into church. And that mom, the Lord just started working in her life. They won't miss a Sunday. Now, the stepdad at this point, she said he's still playing games on his phone, but at least he's in church. But you got to start somewhere. But this family and she is overcoming that hurt and bitterness, and the Lord is moving and working. So the boy, God has given us an opportunity to go through that boy and to watch what happens. We have families. We have a boy at camp right now that the parents are Universalists. They literally, there's Universalist churches that you can just believe in anything you want to, and it's more of a club. But I knew that before that boy came into camp, and I specifically asked them, what are you going to do with our faith? What are you going to do? Because it's going to clash with where you're at. And I don't want that to be a burr under the saddle 6 months into this boy's stay when all of a sudden he's coming home talking about some things he's learning at camp, and you guys are like, whoa, 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 you guys can't teach that. I said, we're not going to change what we teach. We are who we are. You have to either be okay with it, or then camp's not the right place for him. And they said, we're okay with it. We want our boy to figure out where he comes out. Well, just about 3 weeks ago, he accepted Jesus in his heart. And he's pretty scared right now about mom and stepdad. We just encourage him. Inaya, God's going to be with you. God's going to be with you. You don't need to go change them. You don't need to go push something on them. But you've got a life to live now for Jesus, and you've got a foundation. And so, see where it goes. But it's just interesting. These boys sometimes have a tough thing to go back to as a believer because of their family in that way. So, you had a question too? Yeah. I know. I'm worried. This is the stuff's burning. We got to.
Two questions. One is as far as individuals. I'm coming from a kind of artistic kind of personality, where I personally normally like doing what everybody else is doing. I'm sure you deal with some of those. How much is personality taken into account with dealing with these kids? Like how much freedom do they get that way? That's the one thing. The other is runaways. Do you deal with runaways?
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'll do your first one first. The individual part, they've had so much of it. In fact, they've had way too much of it before they came to camp. They were too let go. I mean, too let go because the adults were too wrapped up in their own world. And so this is going to be like taking these boys to Mars, them coming to camp. It's going to be a complete shift. And so we let them know that up front. It is something that they fight hard against at times because there's no getting away from it. Because if you step away from it, you are AWOL. You're a runaway. And we tell boys, it's easy to run away. You only need one leg, half a brain. You just jump behind a tree and you're gone. You don't have to be smart, very intelligent. It's really simple. We're out in 750 acres. There's a lot of woods out here. So to be smart, if you really are smart, we kind of play on them a little bit. If you really are smart, you'll stay put because you could get lost. It can be, night is coming. In the winter, it's going to get cold. So runaways can happen at times. They can almost come a little bit in waves. We've not had a runaway for for years, really, a boy that actually was a runaway. So we've had boys leave their group for a little bit, but we knew they weren't. They were mad, and they just kind of walked off a bit, but we knew they didn't really run away. But if that would happen, then we do have to obviously start looking for them, and then within a certain period, call the authorities, let them know to be watching the roads and whatever. But we've not had that for years, and we try to watch for that. We've had boys that come to camp that were runners. Their history, they ran when they got upset. They got cornered, they ran. And some of those boys never did at camp. And so we do restrain boys. We will physically restrain a boy if he is out of control, trying to hurt himself or hurt somebody else. So we teach all of our staff, they have to be trained how to actually physically restrain a guy. And we got guys bigger than me that are 13, 14 years old. So I tell them the best person to hold you is yourself. But I'm telling you, if you need to be held, I will come out on top. I mean, I will hold you with another counselor's help or whatever, because we want him safe, but we got to stay safe too. But I tell them, holding a big person looks more like a fight than a hold at first, and our goal is not to go there. We work. If I know there's a bigger boy coming to camp and he's a fighter, I won't take him. Because again, that's a liability issue. I don't want our counselors down there physically scared because this guy's a threat physically. I don't want that. They will bluff, and they'll say all kinds of stuff and blow a lot of hot air, but a lot of times it is just that when they're mad because they've heard somebody else do it. They've a lot of anger stuff in their past. So yeah, it is. We try to weigh into that stuff, what kind of a boy it is, what his personality is. We have some boys that are high-functioning autism. It's out there. And so if it'd be a lower-functioning autistic child, camp is not the place because social cues are really hard for them to catch. But a high-functioning one is. But those people often like their space. They like to be more loners. So it is harder for them to socialize and be part of, but it's good for them. It's what they need to keep developing too. So good questions, yeah. To prevent what? Well, the thrift store, at night. Well, the thrift store guys, if they are 21 and over, we do use them for night duty because we are licensed with the state. We actually have, when the chiefs put the boys to bed, then we actually have one person come and do night duty, and they take turns doing that. And they will, and if they're doing that, they're not working during the day either. They sleep during the day on their shifts that they're doing night duty. But they will be in every campsite about once every hour that they make rounds. And so if they would be making their rounds and a bed's empty, then their job is to wake Chief up and say, Chief, Johnny's not in his bed. And then Chief's going to have to get the whole group up and figure out where Johnny's at, and if they can't find him, they got to come up trail, call a supervisor. I don't care if it's 2, 3 in the morning. You do whatever you got to do because we got to start the process of trying to find him. But again, we've not had that for years. And having the night duty that does make their round, the boys know that. They know there's somebody doing it. I'm sure that helps too to kind of keep things in place. So that's helpful. Any other questions? Yeah, some good ones. And like I said, just if you know of other people or staff, that's our biggest thing. You know, the finances part, where God has been blessed us in wonderful ways. The staff needs will be ongoing. That's just continuing forever and always because we know it's always going to be a young team of young people serving. So if there's anybody that knows of somebody that's not even here but might have some interest, tell them to give us a call. Obviously, like I said, the Chiefs, coming to Chief is one that we take our time knowing it's going to be the most demand is going to be on a Chief. And we know we don't want to start that 6 months in and say, okay, you're not working out. That's going to be a big blow to those boys because everything's relational. We want that person to be able to do the whole 2 years. Believe me, every Chief wants to run away and feels like they can't do it at some point. I mean, it just gets that hard. But we have to know that the God that brought you there is the God that's going to see you through. And believe me, Chiefs do have develop an appreciation for their mother like never before. Because when little Carl throws up at 2 in the morning over there in the tent, guess who gets to clean it up? Chief gets to go over there. Or Johnny wakes up wet. He wet his bed. He's going to help Johnny change and clean up. And, every chief at some point looks at his mom and says, man, Mom, you went through a lot. I tell you, I thank you so much for raising me and everything you've done, because now they are being mom, dad, brother, sister, nurse, doctor, lawyer, judge. They're being everything to this group of 10 boys. Let me tell you something. They get to feel every part of it. So it makes good dads and husbands and fathers out of them down the road. And I enjoy, in my role now, watching them develop as much as they love watching their boys develop. So, again, thank you so much. God bless you. And anytime you're passing through that area, stop and take a first-hand look. Just show you around. But we'll turn it back over to Joe.
Great missions moment this morning. Thank you so much, Paul. Your way of expressing yourself and your zeal and passion, and I guess contagious. I noticed the congregation just kind of feel that this morning. Your last point you just made a little bit ago, I had it on my paper here. I've heard this for years, that chiefs are in demand and later in life. They're a catch. Say that. So fellas, yeah. But yeah, and other things. I think maybe as families we've got some ideas this morning too on how to make our family situations work in group sessions. Anyway, I'm not going to say much. I don't want to just distract from what we heard this morning. It's great, and I think we're privileged to have a connection with you, and we've learned a lot this morning as to what's happening at Fair Play. So bless you. Let's stand. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen. Thank you for being here this morning.